Okay. So good morning, everybody. Let's get right into it. So we began a Maamer of the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, Mitzvahs Tiglachas Metzorah, the mitzvah of the Metzorah, the leper. After they become pure, there's a mitzvah for them to cut, to shave all of their hair. As we discussed in the previous class, the section 1 of this mitzvah, the Mishnah and Tractate Negoyim, that there are 3 situations in which there is a mitzvah to shave: the Nazir, the Nazirite, and the Metzorah, the leper, and the Leviim, the Levites, only in the desert. We also learned that the Nazir shaves at the end when he finishes the time frame when he committed himself or she committed themselves to be a Nazir, unless they become impure in middle of that time by mistake or deliberately. And then there's also a mitzvah of shaving, as discussed all in the previous class, the opening of Derech Mitzvosecha, Mitzvahs Tiglachas Metzorah. The last piece, in order to understand this whole concept of growing hair, of cutting hair, what is the concept of hair, the Tzemach Tzedek introduced a Torah, a teaching that he heard from his grandfather, the Baal HaTanya, the Alter Rebbe. And this dealt with another situation where the Torah says you should cut her hair, in addition to what we spoke about, which is a Nazir and a Metzorah. A Metzorah, a leper, after their symptoms are gone and they become pure. And the third situation, in the desert, there was a special mitzvah only for that time in history for all of the Leviim to cut their hair. In addition to that, there's a mitzvah, there's a halacha, a law in Parshas Shmini, which we spoke about at length, that applies to times of war. And that's known as Isha Yefas Tayar, the woman who is gorgeous, who is Yefas Tayar, who's beautiful. And we spoke a lot about the passions of a soldier during the war, and therefore the way the Torah addresses it. And one of the things is that you create a situation where the soldier does not have to release his passions immediately and can control them, because he knows that he will be permitted a little later, perhaps, but only after there is time. There is a time for her and for him to deliberate. And as we spoke about, the Torah says that Rashi explains there that they would dress up the women during times of war in very, very elegant clothing in order to lure the Jewish men into both a moral and military trap. So you shave her head and you cut the nails. We spoke about this at length, right? Ishi Yefas Tayar. The Torah says that. What do you say to R Aryeh Leib?
Oh, I'm talking about cutting hair. Sorry.
Oh, no problem, no problem.
Someone is sick. Just cut your hair. Sorry.
Okay.
You get rid of disease. Sorry, Rabbi, it's my fault.
You don't have to be sorry, it's fine.
Someone with a dreaded disease, you have to cut your hair.
Right.
Sorry.
Right. And you let her cry for her father. You cut the nails, you let her cry for her father and mother for a month. And then either, it's remember, these are POWs. This is a time of war. He says, do not give her to somebody else or sell her. Never let her go free unless you want to marry her, and then it has a regular relationship of a husband and a wife. Fine. We explained this spiritually, that the soul has 2 dimensions to it, the husband and the wife. The soul, in the soul itself, there's the part of the soul that remains somewhat aloof. It never really becomes grounded and manifested in the body. It's the part of the soul that's makif. Makif means it hovers over the body. It has tremendous impact on her. For example, it has a tremendous impact on the body, but it's not felt viscerally in a manifested way through the body. We all have dimensions of ourself and personality that we may not even be aware of consciously. Perhaps most of our soul we're not aware of, because not that it doesn't exist, not that it doesn't impact us, but it remains above. The feminine part of the soul, the wife, femininity doesn't have the luxury to detach. It becomes completely manifested in the body and through the body. So in the soul itself, you have the husband and the wife, and that's called Eishes Yifas Toyer. The soul generally, the husband and the wife, is called Yifas Toyer because it's made up of integration of various attributes and characteristics of Hashem. And that's what beauty is. Beauty is not something that's one-dimensional or one color, even though one color is also beautiful. But he says real beauty comes from harmony. It comes from diversity, working together in synchronization. It comes from symmetry. It comes from cohesion, like a symphony. The very few things that create such ecstasy and delight as when we see diverse elements. That's what beauty is. Beauty is, even in a body, a beautiful physique, a beautiful piece of art, a beautiful choir, a beautiful piece of art, a beautiful piece of music. Even a dish of food. It's the symmetry, it's the diversity, it's bringing together. You fill up a plate with one type of food, okay, it's also nice, especially if you're hungry. But in every field, you'll see that beauty comes from various forces, various energies, various colors, various voices, various notes, various limbs and organs working together in full harmony. It's one of the things that makes our world so beautiful. When you look at the world, you study planet Earth, you see how everything works in such unity and synchronization with other forces. That's what makes it beautiful. You know, you come to the ocean, and that contrast and that sense of unity, of the apparent infinite, or what seems like infinite expanse of water, you know, contrasted with the skies and a sunrise or a sunset and the beach. All of that gives you that sense of reverence and of beauty and of splendor. So that's why the soul is called Yifas Toyer. Why is the soul called Yifas Toyer? Because the soul comes from, he says, Klolus Kama B'chinas, from the unity of many dimensions, of many divine realities. We're not made up of one piece, and that's why a person fluctuates so much. That's why we live in different worlds and sometimes different extremes and different moods. It's not just a chisar and a flaw. You know, why can't I always be in the same space? You don't want to always be in the same space. It's not who you are. You're not in the same space. This is so important to understand. That's what makes a person beautiful. What makes life beautiful. I'm not always in the same space. I have ups, I have downs. Life is a roller coaster. Sometimes somebody said, I don't want a roller coaster, I want to go on the merry-go-round. You know, when you come to an amusement park, some kids like to go right away on the roller coaster. The adults like the Ferris wheel, so you could sit and kratzen a bissel, and some people just want the merry-go-round. You know, they go on the horses around and around. But whether you choose this one or that one, or life chooses one or the other, there is movement, and there's different positions, there's different spaces. There was once a yeshiva boy who was going through various upheavals in his life, and he wrote a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he asked, you know, why does there have to be so many changes in his soul? And the Rebbe wrote something very interesting. He said, "V'bal tzedach shinuyim l'maylo zayin das shinuyim l'mata," which means it's not a mistake. A soul is b'tzelem elikim, b'tzelmenu k'dmeseinu. It's in the image of Hashem. There are fluctuations above, so there are also fluctuations and vicissitudes below. Meaning, the rhythm of life is a rhythm that includes various types of motions. We speak often about ratzoi and shuv. So in the soul is called Yifas Toyer. In the soul, you have the husband of the soul, and you have the wife of the soul, the part of the soul that's manifested within the body and within the animal consciousness. And this wife, this woman, this feminine aspect of the soul can be taken into captivity. It can be hijacked. It can be eclipsed. And you don't have access to it. It doesn't have access to itself. And that's a difficult moment. And he says, spiritually, this is what the mitzvah is talking about. You see this beautiful, beautiful woman. Who is it? Your own soul. My brother told me that somebody asked Michelangelo, one of the greatest sculpturers in the history of humanity, how he managed to sculpture David or his other pieces of art, his other sculptures, which are, each one of them is mind-staggering in the skill and the brilliance and the artistic ability. He says, how did you do this? And Michelangelo responded, he said, I saw the angel trapped in the marble. and I chiseled away on the marble, and I set the angel free. Eishes Yefas Toyar is every person's soul. It's gorgeous. It's full of creativity. It's full of diversity. It's beautiful, Yefei Toyar. But the angel is often trapped in the marble. It's stuck. It's in exile. It's a war. And some of the women are captured in war. So the Tzemach Tzedek says he heard from his grandfather that this is the time to be able to release the angel from captivity. And here there are different processes, and that's what the pasuk is describing in the beginning of Parshas Kiseitze. There's an element of v'chashakta ba. Desire her, you want her, you love her, you crave her. Cheshek means I crave her. What does this mean spiritually, I crave her? It's the ability to actually be able to appreciate that truly what we're craving is our soul. What he calls his hapchus hamidos ra'os. To be able to transform a person's midas. That's very, very deep. That's really getting into the core of my emotions. He says, sometimes I'm not ready for that yet, but at least there's v'gilchas roisha. There's removing the here. What is that? He says that's removing the garments of the animal soul that may be eclipsing my relationship with my inner divine soul. And that's what he's going to explain now. We are up to the line that starts hu. It's probably around 10 or 15 lines from the bottom. The line starts hu pchines havaras. Upirish vinyan alavushim tzoyim the nefesh habahamas. The concept of the unclean garments of the animal soul. What do we mean by unclean garments of the animal soul? What does this mean? It means as we speak often, we often speak about this. This is the basis of one of the main ideas in the Tanya. As he references here, Tanya chapter 10 and chapter 11 and chapter 12, that's where all of this is discussed at length. That we are not made up of one consciousness. We have an animal consciousness, we have a divine consciousness. Now each one on its own has a very unique purpose. The animal consciousness is not bad. It's actually important for survival, like an animal. Every animal, even an insect, a reptile, a fish, a bird, a mammal, each one of them, all the discussion of this week's parsha, all of them, each of them has the genetic makeup and which will give it the instincts to survive. The problem is when the animal soul doesn't only survive, it does extra things that it thinks it needs to survive. In other words, it goes out of its prescribed chemistry and it overcompensates because it's afraid for survival. It's an animal that's gone out of whack. In halacha, it's called a shir hamud. There's a shir tam and a shir hamud. You know the difference? A shir tam is an ox, if you learn Baba Kama, Parshas Mishpatim. An ox that's more or less benign, it's innocent. If it gores, it's completely out of the norm. A shir hamud means an ox that's prone to damage. So we have many, many coping mechanisms that our animal soul acquires, usually in youth. And we have to always be able to distinguish what is essential to survival, which is actually good because it allows the divine soul to live and function and be productive and bring tremendous light to itself and to its family and to its environment and to the world. And what element of the animal soul actually starts blocking and distorting our inner divine consciousness. So this is the avodah of a person, and this is very, very deep avodah, and it requires a tremendous amount of self-awareness, and it requires a tremendous amount of humility, and a tremendous amount of vulnerability. And that's why a person came down to this world. The Alter Rebbe says this often. The soul did not come down to the world to fix itself. The soul came down to the world to heal and repair the animal soul and the body, which is amazing. Because you shouldn't get disturbed and affected and sad that you have to deal with all these things. This is why I was created. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, what are these garments of the animal soul? All the thoughts and words of a person which are disconnected. They're not connected to Hashem or His will or His service, because really all of life is a manifestation of divinity. We always talk about this, right? The foundation of the Baal Shem Tov, Gott is Alts and Alts is Gott. But when I engage in thoughts and words which are not keeping me aligned with Hashem, so the animal soul, instead of being a mirror, that a continuum of the divine soul, it can block it. This includes when a person becomes overly clever and shrewd and sly, even in business. And with this I tarnish the emotions, or even the awareness, the cognition, the intellectual faculties of my divine soul, with an impurity of klipas nega. Klipas nega means those elements in the world that are permissible. Making money, making a lot of money, having a business is permissible. But it's called klipas nega. Klipas nega means a translucent shell, which means I can use it in a way that brings me closer to truth, or also distances me from truth. As we're going to learn later, different ways in which a person could relate to their work. There's work that overtakes me. I become a workaholic and it takes me away from myself. It takes me away from my wife. It takes me away from my children. It takes me away from God. It takes me away from my soul. It just stresses me out. And then there is work, klipas noiga, where I elevate it, as we're going to explain. Even though business, all business, is good, there's a need for it, and it helps in service of God. You've got to make a living. You can give charity. But when it's done with extra shrewdness, means I'm not just smart about it, but I'm ibechachem. Ibechachem means I allow it to overwhelm me, and I become extremely manipulative and exploitive, and I'm a schemer. He says, this is already not what the Torah wants. This is not what the Torah wants. Somebody told me once, a friend of mine, I was talking to him about, we were talking about learning at night when he comes home from work. He says, Rabbi Jacobson, you know what my life is like? He says, I'm in the real estate market in Manhattan. And in the real estate market in Manhattan, he said, there are so many sharks. I said, so what do you do about it? He said, I have also become a shark. If not, I won't survive. So, you understand, and it's very difficult. Thank God he's very he successfully works very hard. He said, I had to become a shark. It was sad to hear that, because he understood that. He had a sensitivity to that. He said, everybody around me behaves like a shark. I had to become a shark. He said, what do you want me to be? A benign puppy? I would have been eaten the first day. I would have been bitten and eaten the first day. But this is what a person has to ask themselves. Am I doing that? Am I allowing myself to degrade my soul and really allow the nefesh habahamis that needs to survive, it wants to survive, to grow garments and layers that are unnecessary? He says this is levushim tsoyim mamish. It's garments of the animal soul that are unclean. So I have to remove all these types of garments that are not allowing my divine soul to emerge. And every person has these garments in their life. So remember, there's the element of a chashaktava and there's v'gilches roisha. It's two things with Eishes Yifas Torah. One is you desire her, you crave her. It's finding your passion for your godly soul. And then there is removing all the outer trappings, like the here, which we're going to discuss, in order to access it. Achatam shenikru levushim tzoyim ela b'shem Cyrus. What does that have to do with hair? Why shave the hair? Remove the garments. Hair is not a garment. Hair is a natural part of the body. Ha'inyin. So let's now begin to discuss the concept of hair. We find in Torah contradictory attitudes towards hair. Pam higbiya milas asaides b'ma'od. K'may b'nazir. Kodesh gadol peres haroshay. Sometimes the Torah elevates the status of hair. Take a Nazir. The Torah says a Nazir, somebody who pledges that they want to be a Nazirite for a certain amount of time, or even for their entire life. The Torah says this person becomes holy. And they grow the hair of their head. And they're not allowed to cut their hair. They're not allowed to shave their hair until the time of Naziris is over. As the Torah tells us by Shimshon, the most famous Nazirite in history, Shimshon HaGibber, Samson the powerful one. Shoftim Tezayin, the 16th chapter of the book of Shoftim. Shekol koichai haya b'sairis. His entire power, his ferocious, his incredible strength, stamina and vigor that was incredibly powerful, came through his hair. And when the Plishtim, the Philistines, ultimately wanted to abduct him and get rid of him, it was through Delilah, through Delilah, who at some moment, a whole experiment that she made with Shimshon once and twice, and the third time finally he spilled the beads. If you ever learned the book of Shoftim, incredible story. And he told her about the secret of the hair. And when she cut his hair, he was depleted from his strength. So we see that every Nazir, Shimshon or not Shimshon, there's a holiness in the hair, there's a sacredness in the hair. Kadosh Yiyah, Gadol Peres HaRoisha. There's a Kedusha in the hair. And he leaves the hair long, and that long hair is holy. You're not allowed to cut it. In fact, just like he's not allowed to become impure to a corpse, and he's not allowed to drink, he's also not allowed to cut his hair. So leaving the hair is a form of holiness. And by Shimshon, it wasn't just holiness. All of his power came through his hair. But sometimes we see a very different attitude. That the Torah actually degrades hair. The Torah is not a fan of hair. Kanal, we spoke before, Binyan HaMetzorah v'Halaviyim. The Metzorah, who has been impure, he's a leper, and now he becomes pure. What does he have to do? Shave his hair. The Leviyim, they were the ones who were in charge to protect the Mishkan and to transport the Mishkan. They had an elevated form of holiness. They had to shave their hair in the desert, not later. Once they came into Eretz Yisrael, that mitzvah was not applicable anymore. And the Kohanim didn't have to shave their hair, but the Leviyim had to. So both by the Metzorah and by the Leviyim, we see that hair is undesirable. If you want to go from a state of impurity to purity, both by the leper and by the Leviyim in the desert, cut your hair. V'chein amru zechernam levracha. We have a similar notion when it comes to married women. The Gemara says in Brachas Chav Dalet, Talmud Brachas 24, Seyar be'isha erva. The hair by a woman, if it's exposed, it's not exposed, Seyar be'isha, hair of a woman, erva. It's something that is erva. Erva literally is translated as nakedness, which means there's something immodest about it. Now, there's no mitzvah for a woman to shave her hair. There are communities, especially from Hungarian descent, where the custom by the women was, and still is, to cut their hair very short. And sometimes really, really, really short. But all the communities, married women, cover their hair. Why do they cover their hair? Why not expose the hair? Whether they cover their hair through a sheitel, a wig, they cover their hair through a hat, through a tichel, whatever, different customs in different communities. But the Gemara says, Seir be'isha erva. There is something sensual. There is something, erva, again, erva literally means nakedness, but it means there's something about the hair that it should be covered. So what is it? What do we...
Some communities like Tush, when I visit my friends at Tush, the women, they just wear, they just have a covering in their head. They don't change their hair. They don't cut their hair.
Yeah. No, most communities, the women don't cut their hair. I mean, they may cut it a little bit, but some do. Some do. Especially, I think, from Hungarian. It was a minig in many Hungarian communities and some others. Not just Hungary, but also Hungary.
What happened with that fake hair? The women were...
Some of the Hasidic communities still have that custom. It's not easy for everybody. It could get. It's not halacha. Many women, many communities don't cut their hair. I mean, they can cut it a little bit based on their desire, but I'm saying generally, after marriage, they cover their hair. And it's only after marriage, it's not before marriage. So again, even by women, before marriage, it's completely fine. It's like the Nazir, in a way. I mean, she doesn't have to leave her hair growing like a Nazir, but it can be open. After marriage, she covers her hair. And we learn this out from Parshas Soita, Parshas Nosoi, where the Torah says, Uparas Roisha, you expose the head of the hair. And from here we learn that usually it should not be revealed, it should not be exposed in public. So Chazal have an expression, Seir Be'isha Erva. There is something very powerful and if you will, sensual. There's an intimate energy in the hair. And therefore it should be covered. Now, so which one is it? Do we love hair? Are we afraid of hair? Do we like when the hair is long? Do we want short hair? Which one is it? By the Nazir, the long hair is holiness. By the Levi, no, not at all. By the Metzorah, not at all. By the women, it's something in the middle. You got to cover the hair. So which one is it? Do we like it? Do we not? What's our opinion about hair? That's what he says. We see contradictory attitudes to hair. These differences don't begin down here. In Jewish law, they begin in the higher worlds. Now, the Tzemach Tzedek is now going to use very mystical language. Don't get scared. This is how you learn new things. We're going to explain. You don't have to understand everything. I just want you to understand the point that he's making. And this is a key point. Whenever there is phenomena that you observe in this world, it does not begin here. It always begins in a higher plane. Just like when you're noticing a twitch in somebody, or you're noticing a physical reaction. You always don't look only for the symptoms, you want to look for the source. Very often people, their physical bodies are mirroring emotional challenges. A very common example for this is Dr. Sarna's method with dealing with back pain. And so many other studies that show that physical experiences in the body are rooted in deeper emotional unresolved tension. The concept here is that nothing is only what it seems. Everything on the surface has deeper and deeper layers. When somebody is crying, you don't just say, oh, the water came out of their eyes. You look for the emotion that triggered those tears. So the Tzemach Tzedek is saying, when you see in halacha a difference of hair, it doesn't start in this world. It starts in the higher reality, understanding what hair is. Ki is the atika kadisha, he mekor chayes kol ha'olamus. In Kabbalah it says that the hair of what's known as atika kadisha. Atika kadisha is a term about Hashem in the book of Daniel, the book of Daniel. Atik yoimin Yosiv. The Ancient of Days. Atik means the old, the Ancient of Days. Yosef, he sits. Levushe kislag chiver. I'm just quoting Daniel. His cloak is like white snow. Usa'areshe kamar noka. And the hair of his head is like white fleece, white wool of a sheep that was just born and it was not yet submerged in dirt or mud. So the sheep is absolutely white and clean. So Hashem, the Atik, is called, he sits with this white hair. So Kabbalah uses this as a metaphor. This is a metaphor. That Atika Kadisha, which represents Hashem, and it's called Atika Kadisha, which literally means the ancient holy one, Atika Kadisha Ayin Kuf. The hairs of Atika are the source of the life of all the worlds. The life force of all the worlds comes from the hair of Atik. Wow. Ki Abba Reishis Atzilus Yoinik Mimazel Hashmini Kinoida. Just I'm translating. Abba means the father. It's usually the term we use for Chachma, which is the first of the attributes of the world of Atzilus. Abba Reishis Atzilus. Atzilus is considered the first world in the order of worlds. Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, Asiya. Abba, father, is the beginning of the world. Then there's Bina, which is the mother, just like the father gives the seed of life to the mother, and the mother conceives it and develops it into a fetus and then brings children into the world. So that's how the spheres work as well. So Abba, the father, is the beginning of Atzilus. And he receives his yonik, he nurses. He receives his nurture mazel Shmini, from the 8th mazel of the 13 attributes. We all know about the Yud Gimel Midas Harachim, and they're called the Yud Gimel Mazolis. The 13 attributes of compassion, which come from Atika Kadisha. We say it in the morning, right? Vayavar Hashem al panav vayikra Hashem Hashem kel racham b'chanon erech apayim rav chesed v'emes, etc. So Kabbalah says Abba receives its life from the 8th mazel kenoida. In other words, the life of all the worlds, which begins with Atzilus, comes from Atika Kadisha, from the here. The mazalis are the here of Atika. Mashenkin Cyrus the Nukva, Yesh Mehem Yenikas Achitzainim. In Kabbalah it will say, the here of Malchus, known as femininity, external forces could receive nurture from it. So the question is, spiritually, what is here? The same contradiction we have down here in Jewish law, what's our attitude to here, we also have in the higher states of consciousness. Sometimes we talk about here as the source of all life. That's the here of Atika Kadisha. And sometimes you'll see in Kabbalah that it says, from the here of Nukva, from the here of Malchus, which is the last of the 10 spheres, there could be Yenikas Achitzainim, which means external, undesirable forces could receive vitality from it. Is here good or is here not good? So you already may have heard the difference. We're talking about Atika Kadisha versus Nukva. So what does this mean? I know this is very mystical, Kabbalistic language, but the Tzemach Tzedek here, in a beautiful, beautiful explanation, is going to bring this down. Explain it and apply it to our lives. The explanation in all of this is Ki Asyrus He Moisrei Moichen. Here represents Moisrei Moichen. What's Moisrei Moichen? Moichen represents cognition. Moichen literally means the brain, which is the house, the seat of our mind, of our awareness, of our consciousness. Moisrei means the extra, the residue, the overflow, the surplus. Moiser, right? Moiser Adam and Abehema. Noiser, we have a concept of noiser, that which is left over. It's the overflow. You know, you fill up the cup and then what overflows is called moiser. Moiserous means extras. You know, you have a certain amount of money that you need to live on and then you have the extra, the moiser. It's always the overflow, the residue, what remains. That's what Cyrus represents spiritually. Meaning, what's the main seat of the hair? The body has hair in different places, but the major concentration of hair is on the head. That's the major concentration of hair. Of course, by men you also have payas and you have the beard, as we will see later in the Maamer, what the concept of this is. And then, of course, there's other parts in the body. In Halach, we have Zaken HaElyon, Zaken HaTachton, the higher beard, etc. Shtei Cyrus. But the hair represents that which is on top of the head. That's the seat of the brain. So it's not a mistake. Why did God do it that way? It represents Moisrei Moichen, that which is extra. It's on top of the head. It's the overflow from the Moichen. We'll explain more what this means. So Einstein taught us the theory of relativity. But here you have his words, he says. If you want to understand the here, it's always relative. You have to look at the place where it comes from. Kibchin is Atika Kadisha, Shu Ein Sof Mamish. Atika Kadisha, which represents Mamish infinity, pure infinity. Hine gam bchinas Moisrus Shaloi. Yesh behem chiyus rav lahachiyos kol ha'olamas. So even the Moisrus, the surplus, the overflow of Atika Kadisha has so much energy to give life to all the worlds. Va'adarab. Furthermore, to the contrary, dafka behem val yadam nimshach achiyus ba'olamas. It's only through the Moisrus, through the here, that the life could come to all the worlds. Ki b'mchinas Atika Kadisha kamay shehu b'muhusev atzmusay I efshel la'olamas lekabel klal. Because from Atik itself, from the core of Atik itself, the worlds cannot receive anything. Because they would never be able to contain and absorb and tolerate such a revelation of life from infinity. if all the doors of perception were cleansed, if there was no here, if the energy would not be contracted, if Atik itself would communicate its energy to the worlds, there would be no finiteness, which means there would be no identity, there would be no I, there would be no diversity. The worlds cannot receive and contain the chiyus from Atik itself because it's absolute infinity. The energy has to be contracted and condensed and filtered through the here. Because as we know, the here also is alive. My here grows. If the here wasn't alive, it wouldn't grow. And yet, the here has a very restricted form of energy because it doesn't have nerve endings. That's why when you cut the here or you cut your nails, it's not painful. It's not painful. They say about the Ragachover, right? We spoke about it last week. The Ragachover didn't take haircuts. The Ragachover gone. He had such long hair and he didn't take haircuts. We'll soon understand this a little better, what's happening here. So the hair also is alive. It has vitality. But the vitality of the hair is what's called, in Chassidus it's called, it's mitzumtzum. It's very restricted. It's very condensed. So therefore, Atik, which is Ein Sof Mamish, it can't infuse its energy in the world the way it is because the worlds will never be able to absorb it, to contain it. They will dissolve into infinity. So the only way Atik Kaddish could communicate its energy is through hairs, through Cyrus, which is a contracted form. So therefore, he's saying, it's all back to what he's saying, it always depends where the hair is coming from. When the hair comes from Atik Kaddish, which is Ein Sof, even the moistness, even the leftovers, even the residue, even the filtered energy is still, wow, it can invigorate all the worlds. And therefore, Hasaydis, same Kedusha, Rabba v'nifla. Amazing words. So therefore, when you're talking about Atik Kaddish, the hair represents incredible and wondrous Kedusha. There is unbelievable holiness in the hair. As the Pasuk says in Daniel, chapter 7, as I quoted earlier, Atik yoimin yasiv levushik islak chiver usareisha kamarnaka. Daniel is in Aramaic, so let's translate. Atik yoimin, the ancient one of days, referring to Hashem. Yosef sits, levushe, his cloak, his garment, kislag chiver, looks like white snow. Slag in Aramaic is sheleg in Hebrew. The shin and the saf are substituted. So kislag, like snow, chiver, white. Usa'ar reishe, and the hair of his head, ka'amar noke, is like clean white wool. Amar, ayin and sadik are substituted. It's like tzemer, kitzemer noki, like clean white wool of a fresh sheep that was just born. You ever saw a new sheep, a baby sheep, without the wool getting dirty, without the wool getting blackened and any soiled? That's the hair of Hashem. Why does Daniel say this? Because this is a metaphor for the Cyrus of Atika Kadisha. It's called his hair, and it has Kedusha Rabba v'nifla. When you are a Nazir during the time of your Nazir, during the time of your Nazirus, the Nazirite, during the time that he or she committed themselves to live this life of sacred sublimity, hu shemeir ha'ara misham, umislabeshes b'saydus shalakim ha'shakasav ha'arizal b'taimim mitzvahs parshas Monsey v'lachein huzar shaloye galeach umitzvah lagadol perak niskalel. A Nazir during the time of the Nazirus, there is a flow of light that comes from Atik. That comes from Atik, that comes from this infinity. And where is it manifested? It's manifested in his hair. The hair on the head of the Nazir is actually a physical mirror and a reflection of the Cyrus of Atika Kadisha. Usa'ar reisha ka'amar noka, that is embodied in the hair of the Nazir. As the Arizal explains in his Sefer Taimei HaMitzvahs, the reasons for the mitzvahs in Parshas Monsey, that's the Parsha of Nazirus. And that's why he's not allowed to shave his hair. He's not allowed to cut himself off from this holiness. The hair has such a powerful energy in it. It's not just regular hair. It's hair that reflects the hair of Atik. And remember, the hair of Atik is responsible for the chiyus, for the vitality of all the worlds. On the contrary, all the worlds can get their vitality only through the hair. They can't get it directly through Atik, because Atik is too intense. It has to be filtered through the hair. And that's why it's a mitzvah on the Nazir to let his hair grow and not touch it. And every person, even if you're not a Nazir, hine besayres hazaken, ubepeyes meir ha'ore mekudeshes, Cyrus ha'elyonis de dikna ilah udepeyes v'lachein huzaru shaloi legalcham. K'mashakasav mitzvah reish on aleph, reish on beis me'posik loy sakifu pas roishchem v'loy sashchis es pas konchem. Why does the Torah give a mitzvah to men not to destroy our payas? You're not allowed to destroy the payas. The payas is the sidelocks that come down from the head, that draws the two sides above the cheeks, temples. And the Torah also says, don't surround, don't make a circle around your head and cut the payas, and don't destroy the beard. Why? What's the big deal if you cut your payas, if you get rid of the beard? The answer is because even if you're not a Nazir, in the hair of the Jewish payas and the Yiddish bard, there's a ha'ara, there's a glimmer, there's a ray of that kedusha, of the hair of Hashem's beard. In Kabbalah, there's something called dikna. Dikna is a beard, like zaken, dikna. Dikna ilah, God's beard, and God's payas. Again, we don't mean physically. Hashem doesn't have physical payas and beards. But everything physical is a manifestation of spirituality. So when we speak about a beard down here, there's a beard up there. It's the beard of Atik. It's the payas of Atik. When I have payas and I have a beard, it's a reflection, it's a manifestation, a little bit of that kedusha. The Torah says, don't cut it off. Don't cut it off. Now, there are Jews who are Erlich from Jews, and they don't have beards because there are different heterim, there are different dispensations in halacha that some people rely on, not everybody, but some people rely on, in order to be able to cut their beard. But everybody knows that's a heter, meaning there's certain dispensations that according to halachic authorities are fine, and therefore some people have that minhag. But even they have to be very careful how they do it, because loy sashchis es pas konchem. But regardless to the various dispensations when it comes to a beard, we all understand that the way Jews did it for thousands of years is they kept their beards. Eliminating the beard is something that was introduced later in Jewish history as a result of influence of the outer world. And then some Jews felt that in order to be a little more integrated or be a little more modern, this is what the look that became accepted. So now many people, they could be very, very big Yirei Shamayim and God-fearing Jews and Erlich Yidden. It's not, the Maisa with the Sat Mirov, yeah? And that's a nice story. I heard this from Mike Tress's son. There was a Yid, his name was Mike Tress. You ever heard of Mike Tress? He's a very special Jew. He was a big askin after the war in the Adar II. He helped a lot of refugees after the Second World War. His name was Mike Tress. He had a heart of gold, and he dedicated his life to help Jews. Very, very special man. So I was once talking to his son. I know his son well. His son lives in Lakewood today. His name is Baruch, and he has a son, Moshe. They're friends of mine. So he told me that he grew up in Williamsburg, and his father was a Yid without a beard. And he would meet the Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Yoelish Teitelbaum, Schusay Yagan Aleinu, and they would shmuas on Rodney Street because they lived near each other. And he said the Satmar Rebbe would sometimes see him in the street and they could shmuas a half an hour. So he says once somebody went over to the Satmar Rebbe and he says, I don't understand. He says, Ayid on a board. Mike Tress is a Jew without a beard, and you're just schmoozing with him for such a long time. So the Satmar Rebbe was very sharp. He looks at this person who had a very long beard and he says, after 120, when Mike Tress comes to heaven, they're going to look at him and they're going to say, Yid, Yid, wo is dein Bart? Jew, Jew, where's your beard? He says, after 120, when you come up, they're going to look at you and they're going to say, Bard, Bard, wo is the Yid? Beard, beard, where's the Jew? In other words, we have to be careful to understand that the beard is a manifestation of Kedusha. Right? Just having a beard itself without anything else doesn't make a person into a holy person. I have to work on myself. I have to be a mensch. Darf sein a Yid. Ayid darf haben a Bard. Aber a Bard darf haben Ayid. A Jew needs a beard, but a beard needs a Jew. My point is that there's a reason that Chassidim especially did not rely on all the dispensations, all the hetadim that some people use to shave their beard. Besides the fact that the Tzemach Tzedek halachically follows the view of the Eshkol that you're not allowed to shave your beard, even with all of the ways, the methods that's used, you're not allowed to do it because Leisilbash Gever Simlas Isha. So Tzemach Tzedek holds that it's absolutely forbidden in halacha. A Jew once told me, it's a Tayyid Yid, his name is Mr. Sharf. So he learned, he's a Baba V'Chusad. So he learned in the Lubavitcher Yeshiva Tam Chetmimim in 1950-51, and he was getting married. And the Rebbe then, the Lubavitcher, would be the Masada Kedushin. He would officiate the weddings of the boys, of the students. Later, a few years later, he stopped, 1960. But those years, he was being Masada Kedushin, the Rebbe. He was Masada Kedushin of my parents. Masada Kedushin means he wouldn't deal with the ksuva, but he would say all the brachas by the chuppah, and he would attend the chuppah. So this Jew told this to me. He says, I went into him, or my father went into him and asked him if he could be Masada Kedushin. So the Rebbe said, the Rebbe had a condition that the woman, those days, a lot of women didn't cover their hair. So the condition was that after the marriage, the woman is going to wear a sheitel and the boy has a beard, because then it was also very unpopular. So he says, but I didn't have a beard. I learned in the Lubavitcher. Then I say, so my father went in. So you learn how to respond. So my father, it says, the Lubavitcher tells my father, he says, Ayezun is a wunderbarer Bacher. Your son is a wonderful, wonderful Bacher, and we really enjoy him and are so proud and grateful to have him in our yeshiva. Aber vozelichton, ich bin an Enekel from the Tzemach Tzedek. But what should I do? I'm a grandson of the Tzemach Tzedek. And by the Tzemach Tzedek, it's usher not to have a beard. So therefore, you can't ask me to do this. So in a very elegant way, the Rebbe was not Masada Kedushin. Because by Hasidim and generally, including Chabad, it was a very important thing, the beard. So Tzemach Tzedek held that halachically you have to have it. The Tatum don't apply. There's different shittas in halacha. Other Jews have different opinions. Fine. But here we're learning something else. We're not talking here now only about if you can get away with it. We're talking about the kedusha that exists in a beard. The Tzemach Tzedek says even if you're not a Nazir, in the hair of a Yiddish bard and in the payas of a Jew, you have a ha'ara from Cyrus of Attic. And in the Cyrus of Attic is kedusha, rabba, v'nifla. There's a tremendous kedusha. And that's why, just like the Torah tells the Nazir, never cut your hair, the Torah tells a Jew, don't cut your payas and don't destroy your beard. V'ulam, ha-Nazir meir b'kedusha al yened atik kedusha b'chol saroshen. The difference is, the Nazir, the holiness, is manifested in all the hair on his head. A regular Jew, you're allowed to take a haircut. A Nazir is not allowed to take a haircut. It's not just the payas and the beard. By a Nazir, it's all the hair. Mashenkin pchinis. But that's the unique by a Nazir. But a regular person, a regular male Jew, it's in the payas and in the beard. Mashenkin pchinis nukve datzilis. Sho pchinis tzimtzum lagabe atika kadisha. Oz me pchinis moisre moichin shala. Yuchaliyas yinikas achitzayna. Now we come to the other side. When you talk about nukva datzilis, when you talk about the way atzilis, the way divine energy becomes present and grounded in a way that it's contracted and filtered. Atika Kadisha is pure infinity. When you have pure infinity, the overflow, the residue, the surplus is also infinite. It's also unbelievably holy. That's why the life force of all the worlds comes from the hair of Atik, and that's expressed in the Nazir, that's expressed in the beard, and that's when the hair is holy. But when you have Nukva Vatzilis is, you have Atik is all the way on the top, and Nukva, femininity, is called Malchus. That's the last of the spheres of Atzilis. Here, the energy becomes very grounded, very practical, very filtered. It's contracted, it's condensed, it's focused, it's concentrated. It's not flying into infinity. So he says, here you have to be careful with hair. Why? So the hair is also amazing. But the surplus of it, what overflows from it, yuchaliyas yinikas achitzayna. From this here, there could already be yinika, there could be a nurture, there can be vitality that goes into external forces. And that's why women who represent Malchus, they represent the divine energy that becomes grounded in the body. They represent the divine energy that is very present in this world. It's the divine energy, the way it's communicated into femininity, which represents full presence, full imminent manifestation, halbasha, as we will see. That requires the energy to go through the tension of tzimtzum. So now, the here is holy. It's Malchus of Atzilus. So now, it's holy. Malchus is very, very holy. But from the here, which is the Moisre Moichen, the surplus, the overflow, it's different. It can be misused. It can become used in a counterproductive way. What's called in Chassidus Yinikas HaChitzonim. External, superficial, fake forces can use it, can be yoinik. You know, sometimes you say something. It says in Pirkei Avos, Chachamim hizaharu b'divreichem. Sages, be careful with what you say. Why? Because maybe, certain students who are not capable of getting it will misuse your words. It's not that what you're saying is bad. It's not bad. But there could be a nikas achitzonim. It can be distorted. By the Nazir, where the here is coming from Atika Kadisha. Atika Kadisha is pure Ein Sof. So even the residue, the overflow, the surplus also has that tremendous holiness, and therefore, on the contrary, the here could be completely revealed and grow. He has to grow his hair, and he's not allowed to cut it even if the yerich vase is very, very long. And similarly in the payas and the beard. You don't say cut the beard or cover the beard, fakert. So why by Isha, Seya bi Isha Erva? They didn't want the hair to be revealed, the married woman. So the Tzemach Tzedek explains, because the woman represents Nukva. Nukva of Atzilus. That's the way the divine energy is ready to go into the finite world and to become grounded. Now that is a tremendous journey of God's energy. It's not where godliness remains aloof, sublime, transcendent. No, it's going into the world of Tzimtzum. And it's going to contain the universe. It's going to be the mother, we call it Mother Earth. It's the way God becomes the Shechina, femininity, becomes the progenitor of the world. Nukva of Atzilus. And this represents a big tzimtzum. There's a serious tzimtzum that happens here. It's not atik anymore. So now you have to know that the here is very, very powerful. But the here can be misconstrued, it can be misunderstood. Nukva itself is pure holiness, but from the moisre, moicha, from the surplus, it can be distorted, and therefore the woman needs to cover. That's why Chalacha says she should cover her hair. Seir bi'isha erva. The exposed hair, the hair of the woman erva, it has a sensual energy. It has a deep, deep, intimate energy in it, which can be misconstrued, can be misused by herself and by other people who have contact with the hair. And the covering of the hair protects that energy, that it shouldn't be misused in any way. This is the nekuda of the difference of hair. Why is sometimes hair amazing and sometimes hair the other way around? He says it depends where the hair is coming from. Hair is always moisre, moichin. The question is if it's from Atik or it's from Malchus. If it's from Atik, Kedusha Rabba v'Nifla. If it's from Malchus, you have to be careful with it.
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
A few years ago, in the Hasidic community, I believe in Brooklyn, the women were bringing hair from Pakistan. They were bringing in not their own hair. They were packaging to make photos. What did the community do with that? It's really contrary to what the Torah teaches us. They're using fake hair. You don't want to comment, you don't have to.
Yeah, I hear.
Boring.
This is also, by the way, connected to Upshernish. Why we don't cut the hair of a boy for the first 3 years. It's also very interesting. Because during those years, there's more of an expression of Atik, the superconscious. Once we're 3, it's amazing. Today we know this in neuroscience. The earliest years, attachment is the key. When you're born, when you're 1, when you're 2. After 3, you think, they're still babies. But after 3, everything is different. Things get processed in a more verbal way. So pre-3, it's pre-verbal, it's keser, it's atik, it's superconscious. So that's when you let the hair grow long like a nazir, similar to a nazir. And then after 3, we cut the hair. Now we have to channel the energy in a more restricted way. Things are now much more verbal and they're integrated within the finite intellectual faculties. The first 3 years are very, very crucial because everything gets processed in a subconscious and superconscious way. So this is also fascinating how the first 3 years represent the nazir. Over there, it's not a halacha, it's just a minhag. It's known as upshernish, but it's also a similar concept. It's just a siddur maharid.
Very nice.
Ah?
You talked this earlier in the class about, what's his name? David, Michelangelo. How do we cope with people? I know a lot of friends of mine, I have relatives. They love art. They buy art. They buy, not paintings, statues. And they sit all day looking. It's a voida zora. It's a voida zora. They look at these statues. They spend big money in the art galleries. It's a voida zora.
Yeah, my mother told me that she was dating my father, Zechrona Levracha Ertzelang Yarden, in 1955. 1955. So they would go to Manhattan. My father had a beard. 1955. And she said they would walk on the streets of Manhattan and everyone stopped to look at him. It was so outlandish. It was so unusual and surreal to see a man with a beard in 1955 that they pashut stopped. Now, why did people get upset that the Satmar Rebbe spoke to Mike Tress? Somebody's asking. I don't think he was upset that he spoke to him. He gave him so much attention, and he had so much. I guess the person maybe felt a little jealous and envious. He was a Satmar Chassid, and he had a long beard, and why does the Satmar Rebbe show so much affection to Mike Tress? I mean, that's what his son once told me. Question about a woman's hair. If the reason for covering is because of its spiritual source, why wouldn't the hair need to be covered before marriage? Is it because the only potential for misuse comes after marriage? Okay, great question. Somebody else says, you're saying that the theory of relativity originates by hair. The truth is it's true because 2 hairs on the head is very little. 2 hairs in the soup is a lot. Very good. Very good, very good, very interesting.
Hair in the soup, yeah.
Huh? Okay. So we need to explain more about women's hair. Somebody asks a good question. Why not before marriage? And what's this idea? So this needs all more explanation. And Bli Neder, we're going to do that in the next shir, which is going to be Be'ezer Hashem Monday morning, 7:30. And we're going to continue this Maamer, because now the Tzemach Tzedek, it was still very abstract. What does this mean? That from a higher place, the surplus is holy. And from a lower place, the surplus changes. So that's going to be now the next discussion, and the other issues about women covering their hair will also become much clearer. Please stay tuned for shir number 3 in this Maamer. You could prepare in advance. You could review the past. You should always do that. And I'm going to wish you all a beautiful and meaningful day. Let me just announce also that Shabbos we have our regular schedule here in Monsey. Sunday morning there's going to be a special class on the yeshiva.net and also Zoom. We're going to learn a special Sicha L'Kutei Sichas Parshas Tazria, a hadron of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a Masechta Kinim. You don't want to miss it. An incredible hadron both in Nigla and in Nister. That's going to be Sunday morning. You can also watch a replay. We'll send out a WhatsApp about it. And Monday morning we're going to have our regular 7:30 class. Monday afternoon we have a special class with the South African community. You can watch it on the yeshiva.net, and the topic is resurrection of the dead. When will it happen? How will it happen? Will we be part of it? What is it going to look like? That's Monday afternoon. I wish you all a beautiful, beautiful day. Hatzlacha, thank you for joining us. Okay, we'll take a look. Rabbi R Aryeh Leib, chazak ve'ematz. It's a pleasure to have you back. Thank you for being here.
Read my email, you'll like it.
Bli neder.
Interesting. See, all right.
I know a lot of things. I see a lot of questions on the chat. I see like 20 questions. So I know a lot of things are not explained. I'm going to ask you to please have patience. You know how these classes work. They build, it's not just one self-contained lecture. I'm sorry, it's not what we do here. So please, we're going to continue this Maamer and you'll understand it more and more and more. So just, I know there's a lot of questions coming in about the hair and covering hair and a sheitel and a tichel and women and girls and men, etc. It's a very relevant and intense conversation and subject, but believe Be'ezer Hashem, it will become clearer. Thank you. Yeah.
I just came back from Yerushalayim, my grandson's upstairs, and it was such a kedusha film, unbelievable.
Yes, an upshernish is a very special occasion. Yeah, very special. Yes, yes.
This kid, like, is filled with kedusha for his life, become a rebbe.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you, it was awesome.
Thank you, Rabbi. Mr. for bringing on Purim.
We have it. Somebody video. It's going to be put up in the next few days.